Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. Day 7, final day of our session 2015, continuing with the Gateless Barrier, case 26. Fayan, 2 monks roll up the blinds. A monk once went to the great Fayan of Qingliang before the midday meal to ask for instruction. Raising his hand, Fayan pointed to the bamboo blinds. 2 monks went and rolled them up in the same manner. Fayan said, "One gains, the other loses." Wumen says, "Tell me, which one gained, which one lost? If you have the single eye regarding this, you will see where the national teacher, Qingliang, failed. But I warn you strictly against arguing gain and loss." Wu Men's verse, "When they are rolled up, the vastness of space is illuminated and clarified. Yet the vastness of space still does not match our way. Far better to throw everything away, even vast space completely, so closely intimate not a breath of wind can pass through." Once again, today I'm amazed by the miraculous synchronicity of sesshin. Just yesterday, I was talking about the 5 houses of Zen and struggling to remember them all. And we had the Rinzai, which is in Chinese Linji, and we had the Soto, which in Chinese is Cao Tung, and we had the Igyo, which in Chinese is Wei Yang, and then Doshu helped me with the Umon school, which is Yunmen in Chinese. And today, reading the notes for this case, I was reminded that the 5th school is the Hogen school, which in Chinese is Fayan. So here we have the man, the teacher, who a whole school, one of the 5 houses of Zen, was named after. So we have to be very careful. We're not dealing with a small player here. It's the big guy. A monk once went to the great Fayan of Qingliang before the midday meal to ask for instruction. And so the context of this is actually going to the hall or going to the Dharma hall. Just the other day I was talking about how Linji held 2 meetings a day with his students, and one was very dynamic and interactive, much less formal, and the other was more of a lecture. The first one more of a direct pointing. And so in this case, what we have is one of the first ones, an opportunity for direct pointing in the morning. Raising his hand, Fayan pointed to the bamboo blinds. So, I guess what we can... Every day in the morning when we start in the Zendo, as soon as the light rises outside, enough that a person standing outside can look at their hand and see the lines in their hand, the tradition is that we sound the kaihan, the sounding board or the wooden bell outside. And once the kaihan is sounded, that's something that in a monastic environment and maybe in my neighborhood can be heard all around. And it's a signal that the day has begun and that there's enough light. But there's a very practical side to it as well, which is that it's time to put out the lamps. Oil in those days that was used for the lamps, or even candles, were a precious commodity. And so it wasn't they weren't wasted, not even for a second. So as soon as there was enough light to see the line on your hands, it's time to put them out. And so somebody signaled that, the person with the kaihan. And so depending on the weather, depending on the time of year, things could be quite dark. So in the meditation hall, this interaction takes place, and a person comes and begins to ask a question. And it's much like if I had come in today and I said, we were about to start the talk and the lights weren't on. There's supposed to be light in the Zendo when we're giving a talk. And so Fayan points to the blind. Maybe very much like these blinds, who knows? As I was saying before about light, I think these blinds have been used in Zendos forever. And when he pointed, 2 monks jumped up to go roll them up. And it says 2 monks went and rolled them up in the same manner. Fayan said, "One gains, the other loses." When we take up Zen practice, our fundamental focus and our most important effort has to be pointed at realization of this fundamental nature, which I've been talking about all week. This fundamental nature which is beyond subject and object, self and other, inside and outside, and, as is in this case, gain and loss. We have to realize this as our original home. We have to recognize that everything that we do, everything that manifests in this vast cosmos, as nothing other than the arising and falling, the birth and death activity of this fundamental nature. And as I said earlier in the week, there are many different ways that we can name this origin, as long as we understand that fundamentally it has no name. We can call it Buddha nature, the origin, the self. Or we can call it the manifestation of unconditional love. When we come to a place in our practice where we begin meeting other people in a capacity as a mentor or a guide or even as a teacher, we have to expand this, or we have to be able to experience this origin, this manifestation of unconditional love in relationship with another. Each person that comes to practice, we have to be able to understand and realize that fundamentally this is another human being who is stepping forward on a path to realize this origin, this original nature, this manifestation of unconditional love. And if we're to interact with them, we have to be able to interact from this place of unconditional love. And if we're a person who's coming to practice as a student and we're looking for a teacher, there's a lot of stories in Zen where people are being hit and yelled at. And right from the beginning, when we come into a Zen center, there's a lot of rules to be broken, and there's a lot of mistakes to be made, and there's a lot of ways that we can be corrected. When we enter into Zen practice, we put our lives on the line, literally. We spend all of our lives, every waking moment, in the development of this thing that we call a self, in this thing that we call an I, and a personality, and a me. And when we come to the Zen school, we have to realize that the primary function, one of the most important activities that we do in this Zen school, is either piece by piece, little bit by little bit, or in great chunks, dismantle our fixation, our hold on the self. It's not a joke when we talk about things like calling realization the great death. This self that we've so carefully constructed, our aim is to allow it to slip through our fingers, to let it go. So when we engage with a teacher, it's important for us to have confidence, to have trust, and to have faith that that teacher is viewing us and embracing us from the perspective of unconditional love. And this is very different than a personal love. This is very different than a like. As a teacher, as a person who's responsible for creating and maintaining a place of practice, we don't open the doors to only people that we like being around. We don't open the doors to only people that we get along with on a personal level. And we don't open the doors only to people who don't irritate us. I remember when I was first starting practice, reading a letter that was written from a Zen teacher to a monastery, a training monastery, that was criticizing them for their tendency to reject anybody who wasn't just so well-balanced, well-behaved, well-souled, all of that. If you were a little bit off, then they didn't want to take you. It was too risky. It was too difficult. It might cause disruptions in the program. And this teacher said, "What the hell do you think that place is for?" But the teacher's job is not to make us feel comfortable. The teacher's job is not to avoid our every sensitive spot. The teacher's job is not to say only things that we like in a way that we like them. In fact, in many ways, at times, the teacher's role is to do the very opposite of this. To poke at us, to prod us, to expose to us where it is that we get stuck, where it is that we hang on, where it is that we are protecting this idea of a self, where it is that we are vulnerable and sensitive because we do not believe in our fundamental completeness. And that makes it uncomfortable. Sometimes it makes it unpleasant, downright unpleasant. But that's how we grow. That's how we develop. If we go through our lives constantly looking for somebody who won't say something unkind to us, who won't tease us, who won't poke fun at us, then the world becomes smaller and smaller. But we have to be careful, because we shouldn't be looking for somebody who's imitating. We shouldn't be looking for somebody who pokes and prods and ridicules and humiliates because they think that that's Zen. Coming back to what I began with, we have to be sure that the fundamental relationship is one of unconditional love. That our teacher has to be able to see and realize this Buddha nature manifesting in themselves. And we have to have confidence that they are also able to see that Buddha nature in us. So that when we forget, so that when we are distracted and when we are fixated on our small I am self, they can point that out and say how silly that is. They can point that out and how it creates suffering for us. Don't expect your teacher to always be happy. Don't expect your teacher to always be even-keeled or calm. My kids have been a powerful teacher for me. And one of the things that I observe in myself and in relationship with them is that when you live with your children and you have close relationships with them, which I hope you do, you see them doing things with each other that are absolutely beautiful. Whether that's as a young child making things out of macaroni or rocks and sand and coming to you with nothing but generosity, opening their heart and giving it to you. Or when you give them money for something to take to school or to get at school, and when they come home and they don't have it, and you say, what happened? I gave you the money. You're supposed to get that thing. And they said, oh, well, so-and-so really wanted this other thing, and he didn't have any money, so I gave it to him. And you think, boy, I'd really like to give you trouble right now, but how beautiful that heart. And as a Zen teacher and as a parent, I say, what a wonderful manifestation of Buddha nature coming through this child. How can I do anything but smile? And that's one side. And I have this same experience when I'm practicing with people. When I see people stand up and voice, or in interactions with objects or with each other, manifest not as a small self-concerned person, but manifest in a way that demonstrates unquestioningly their immersion and their realization of the subtle and intimate relationship between all things, one true nature. Likewise, when I see my children and they're interacting with one another, and suddenly one manifests or one does something that's just mean, or careless, absent-minded, unthinking, self-centered, I get upset. As a parent, I get upset. And what I find is that sometimes I'm just mad because I want them to do something in a certain way. But particularly when I see them being cruel to one another or to even to objects, I'm upset because for me, I know their heart. I know their capacity. I know their abundance of generosity and kindness, and what I see is them manifesting out of this self-perspective. As a teacher, you're not children. You're all adults. Over and over, people contact the Zen Center and they ask, do you have any kids programs in your Zen Center? And there's a lot of Buddhist places that do run children's programs, and maybe it's a good idea. But the best Buddhist program that I have is that generally when people call up and say, do I have any children's programs? I say, no, but I've got some great stuff for parents. Not children. This is a grown-up practice. But from the perspective of the Dharma, each of us is a baby Buddha. Each of us has this unlimited capacity. We talk about all of the Buddhas and all of the Bodhisattvas, the Bodhisattva of compassion, the Bodhisattva of great activity, the Bodhisattva of prajna paramita, great wisdom. And these are all just images, personifications of your own heart. When the separation between subject and object disappears and we raise a hand to help, we are the manifestation, the embodiment. We become Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. When we allow our self-concerns to drop away and act with fundamental wisdom rooted in that unification between subject and object, we are the manifestation of Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of great wisdom. So as a teacher, my interaction is to make every effort to see you from this perspective of the Absolute, to embrace and encourage and stoke that fundamental nature, and to generate a heat in relationship so that when we meet face to face over and over again, all of the small bits, all of the places of attachment, all of the restraints and shackles and fetters that we place on our own nature with this thing called I, with our preferences and aversions, are revealed in their nakedness. I just act. I speak. I move and I talk. And you, as students on the other side of the relationship, respond. You listen and you watch and you feel. One of the things that really struck me during this session is I was laughing actually because I said to myself, I said, you're much deeper than you mean to be. And the reason is that at some point during the session, I think it was just after Egan left, I made a comment about somebody having a 180-degree shift in perspective. And this led to a realization and a real change in that person's experience of practice, because they explore this idea of a 180-degree perspective shift. But I had to confess when I was told about this, I had to confess that all I was talking about was that the person went from this side of the Zendo to that side of the Zendo. I wasn't trying to be wise at all. This is the way. I'm just manifesting and I speak. And we respond. We respond from the perspective of a self. There's no other place that we can act as a self than from our subjective perspective. When I was training Gente Osho, who I trained with for a couple of years, we were talking about the Jigajitsu role, and he said, the best correction you can make in the Zendo as the Jigajitsu is no. He said, it's always good. He said, even if you're asleep in the Zendo and you suddenly come to, you should just say no. Because somebody's thinking about something that's distracting, or somebody's moving, or somebody's doing something they oughtn't. When you think about it, it's actually a wonderful correction. Because when we think about what no points to in our tradition, it is mu, it is emptiness. So if we're sitting in the Zendo and we've allowed ourselves to drift off with, whether it's the daughters of Mara or a chocolate extreme blizzard, which, guilty. That mu, no, allows us to reconnect with it. And we respond. I can't count the number of times where I've made a correction in the Zendo, sometimes a pointed correction at an individual person who is engaged in something, and then in the following interview had 4 or 5 people come downstairs and apologize, or to complain, or to argue with me about how cruel my correction was. And sometimes they don't believe me when I say, actually, I wasn't even talking to you. I'm not so powerful that I can make you hurt violated or offended or angry or demeaned or belittled. We have to recognize that these emotions are responses to circumstances that arise. If I could do those things, I would also help you to let go, and I would help you to purge your negative emotions, and I would help you to have better relationships with your children and your spouses, and I would help you awaken. But nobody seems to blame me for those things, because we recognize that those are our business. One Zen teacher says, I can't so much as fart for another student, let alone help them awaken. Well, after refried beans and fruit compote, I can say from experience that in spite of my trying, I think that this is true. Although I think I did pretty well for myself. So, Fayan, sometimes you do something and two people respond. Sometimes you make a correction and two people respond. Sometimes you're correcting two people and they both respond. Their physical transformation, the physical response, is one aspect. The internal response is entirely another. Any circumstance can happen, and the response to it is different. Sesshin is a great example. We can have somebody, and often I see this in interview, one person after the other, responding to corrections or talks or even just the sitting, and it's like up and down, each having a totally independent experience. Fayan points to the blind, and two monks went and rolled them up in the same manner. Fayan said, "One gains, the other loses." Wumen asks, "Tell me, which one gained, which one lost?" If you have the single eye regarding this, you will see where the national teacher King Liang failed, but I warn you strictly against arguing gain and loss. From the very beginning, Fayan sets us up. He sets the two monks up. If you were one of the two monks that jumped up, seeing your teacher point at a blind, thinking you understand what he means, and so does another monk, and Fayan says, one gains and one loses. How do you respond? Are you the one that gained? Are you the one that lost? How do you know this? Fayan throws out a sticky piece of fly paper, and it's very difficult with a statement like this for us not to fall into it wholeheartedly, trying to figure out what it is that has been gained and what it is that has been lost. I think the best thing that we can do to investigate this is to investigate our own practice. When we look at this session or our session practice in general, I think that it's important for us to really contemplate the things that we have gained through practice. And also, I think that it's very important for us to contemplate and investigate and honestly reflect on the things that we have lost through practice. Sometimes the things that we gain aren't gains at all. Sometimes the things that we have lost, we're glad to be shot of. But in the end, Fayan is pointing. One gains, the other loses. Offering us a great place to attach, to get caught up in gain and loss. But the truth is, it's this same one, gaining and losing. There is nowhere to go. There's no winning. When we get caught up in thinking that we're making it somewhere, we fall off of the way. When we think that, this is not going anywhere, also, we fall off the way. In the end, as Linji says, we have nowhere to go, and we have nothing else to do but engage in this very activity. We'll be pinched, we'll be poked, and we'll be prodded in this practice. We'll be pinched in the areas that we're sensitive, in areas where our lives pinch us over and over again and keep us fixated, stuck to this wheel of difficulty and suffering and misery over and over again. We'll be pinched there and poked there until we learn to let it go, until we learn to manifest more fully our nature, our complete nature, manifest more fully as the Buddha or the ancestor or the Bodhisattva, because we aren't anything other. This barrier, this bamboo blind, Wumen says, when they're rolled up, the vastness of space is illuminated and clarified. When we take away this barrier between subject and object, the vastness of space is illuminated and clarified. We have quite an expansive perspective. Wumen says, yet the vastness of space does not match our way, this Dharma. Even more vast is this Dharma activity. Far better to throw away everything, even vast space completely. So closely intimate, not a breath of wind can pass through. This is this intimate relationship that manifests between teachers and students, because it's the intimate relationship that I was talking about when you stand up and face the Butsudan to do your prostration. Buddha sees Buddha. Buddha is face to face with Buddha. When we get stuck, when we fixate ourselves, when we are distracted by our preferences and our aversions, this is just a bamboo screen dropping between Buddha and Buddha. Thank you all so much for your practice this week. For me, it's been a really remarkable session, and not least of which this fantastic thundering finish we've experienced. How auspicious. Thank you all. Okay, well, we'll have just a little bit of we'll have a short walk so that the monks can get out of their cases. I'm going to, there's a tradition that Genjo uses, which is for the abbot to compose a poem. And we read it. I'll offer incense, and I'll read the poem. And then afterwards we'll have some tea. And that will be our whole session. Oh, before we do that, I just want to say a couple things. It can wait. I'll say them afterwards. You've all been sitting for a long time. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.